Dust swirled like old spirits across the dry red earth, soft and restless, until it blanketed everything in silence. The tall acacia trees stood still, their twisted limbs like elders caught mid-prayer. The early mist had not yet lifted from the village of Camberley, and the only sound came from the rhythmic thwack of a blade biting into wood. Sefu Ajani stood at the edge of the forest, chopping firewood near the roots of an old iroko tree. His shoulders were as broad as oxen yokes, his skin darkened by decades of sun and smoke, and his beard carried streaks of gray like forgotten ash. His eyes, sharp and unreadable, had seen too many seasons. People in Kambale said Sefu had once been a husband, perhaps a father, but no one asked anymore. He spoke only when firewood was short and smiled even less than the moon during harvest. They said he lived with grief like a second skin, heavy, cracked, and faded from use. But on that morning, something stirred in the wind that carried whispers from the village toward the trees. Something pulled Sefu down from the forest path toward Kambale's dusty heart. As he walked past termite mounds and rusted drums, his boots pressed prints into the earth, like history writing itself. Smoke curled from cooking fires. Palm thatch roofs glistened with dew. And yet, despite the stillness, a tension hung in the air, like a warning cloaked in birdsong. He found them near the back of the trading stalls, where baskets of cassava and calabash usually stood. A small group had gathered, drawn not by food, but by shame. Sefu didn't mean to stop, but the voice, sharp, brittle, womanly, wrapped in anger and bitterness, made him pause. "She's carrying disgrace beneath my roof." The voice sliced through the morning like a machete. "And I will not have it anymore." A young girl stood in the shade behind a cracked mud wall, wrapped in a faded blue wrapper and thin shawl. Her stomach was unmistakably round beneath the fabric. Her eyes stayed low. She did not cry. She did not speak. She looked like someone who had already walked through fire and now stood only in the smoke. Beside her stood the woman who must have been her mother, hard-eyed, arms folded, mouth like a blade. "You want her? She's yours. Ain't worth the food she eats. A child full of shame and still acts like it's my burden." A few men snickered. One laughed too loud, the kind of laugh that hides cruelty. Another stepped forward, muttering something about payment. Sefu didn't catch the words, only the hunger in the man's eyes. The girl didn't move. She didn't plead. She was still like stone left in the sun too long. Sefu stepped forward, before thought caught up. His boots crunched the red soil as the circle of watchers parted. He did not look at the girl, not yet. He looked at the mother. "What's the price?" he asked. The woman blinked, startled. "You want her?" "I asked the price." She sniffed. 3 silver cowries or a sack of millet. Sefu reached into his worn satchel and pulled out a small pouch. He tossed it into her palm with no ceremony. "She walks with me." The girl looked up then. Her eyes met his, wide, untrusting, not grateful. But something inside them moved. Not hope, just recognition. "Fine!" her mother snapped, pocketing the coins. "She's not mine anymore." Sefu didn't wait for the crowd to gossip louder. He turned and started walking. The girl followed a few paces behind, not out of obedience, but because she had no other direction to walk. As they passed weathered market stalls and earthen homes, whispers chased their heels like wind trailing a funeral drum. "Sefu Ajani took in a cursed girl," someone muttered. "A bastard's mother, walking with a man who buries silence in his chest," another said. "Maybe he's tired of eating alone, or maybe he's too broken to care." By the time they reached the forest's edge, the girl's shawl clung tighter, her steps slower. She didn't ask where they were going, didn't ask his name. And Sefu, shaped by storms and the long ache of remembering, said nothing in return. They reached his compound by the time the sun crouched low. A round hut with clay walls and palm frond roof stood tucked into a slope. Firewood was stacked shoulder-high against one wall. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney hole like breath from a sleeping beast. He opened the woven door and stepped aside. She paused, only for a breath, and entered. Inside, the hut was warm and dim. A clay stove smoldered in one corner. A reed mat lay by a low wooden cot draped in a faded goat hide. A small table with 2 stools and a calabash basin stood against the far wall. The girl sat without command, folding her arms. Sefu filled a pot and set it over the coals. "Food will be ready soon," he said. She nodded once, a gesture like wind brushing a leaf. When the stew was done, he ladled it into a wooden bowl and slid it toward her with a carved spoon. Her hands shook. She spilled some. "Use both hands," he said softly. She tried. Failed again. He reached over, steady, firm, and guided the spoon to her lips. She did not flinch, did not thank him. She just ate. That night, she slept on the cot. Sefu laid his mat near the stove. No words passed between them. But the fire crackled, and the silence, for the first time in years, began to shift. The next morning arrived with a haze of orange light stretching across the canopy. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of charcoal and old sorrow. Inside the hut, the girl rose before Sefu. He heard her movements, quiet, careful, like someone trained not to disturb even in pain. She swept the hearth, boiled water, washed the bowl she had used the night before. Sefu lay on the mat, eyes closed, listening not just to her footsteps, but the intent behind them. She was not trying to impress. She was trying to disappear while still being useful. A ghost who scrubbed dishes. For 3 days they said little, only words like would, eat, or here. The kind of speech used by people who fear stories, because stories lead to memories. She fetched water. He chopped wood. She stirred millet. He mended nets. And still, no names. Knowing a name meant something could be taken from you. And both of them had lost enough. But on the 4th day, the drums in the village pounded early. Not for celebration. For judgment. Olabayo Hara, the widow of the late pastor, and Kambeli's self-proclaimed guardian of decency, arrived on a borrowed donkey, with her Bible bound in leather, and her tongue sharpened like cane knives. She stood outside Sefu's compound, her shadow long against the red dust. "Sefu Ajani!" she called like a curse disguised as scripture. He opened the door, but didn't step out. The girl remained behind him, hidden in the shadows, her back straight, but her eyes cast low. "I've heard," Olabayo began, "that you keep a girl in your home, a girl swollen with shame, and she's not your blood." Sefu didn't answer. Olabayo's nostrils flared. "People are watching. They'll keep watching. You should do right. Marry her or send her away. That child will need more than hot soup and pity." Sefu didn't argue. He didn't open the door wider. He just said, "She's not ready to leave, that's all." "You're inviting fire into your home," Olabayo warned, "and the village never forgets the smell of smoke." She turned her donkey and left in a swirl of dust and righteousness. That night, by the fire, the girl finally spoke. "You shouldn't have taken me," she said, voice low but steady. "They'll blame you." He looked up from the stew pot. "They would have blamed me anyway." She stirred the ashes with a stick. "I'll leave when I'm stronger." "You'll leave when you choose to," he replied. "Ain't for them to decide." She looked at him then. Not just looked, studied. "Why do you do it?" He didn't answer right away. The stew bubbled, the coals hissed. "Because," he said, voice almost too quiet to catch, "you looked like someone who already survived the worst. And no one should have to survive the worst alone." She didn't thank him, but she smiled. A small thing, a cracked gourd learning how to hold water again. The days passed with rhythm, not of joy, but of balance. She moved through the hut like memory, soft, unclaimed, always slightly out of reach. She folded blankets with care. She left food for the chickens, even when she didn't eat herself. She hummed once in the morning, a melody half-remembered from a childhood before her dignity was traded for coin. Sefu noticed. He didn't speak of it, but he left his boots dirty more often, forgot to wash his own bowl, left the fire low, so she would have something to do, something that gave her spine shape. On the 6th day, he found her standing at the edge of his land, eyes staring past the thorn bushes, down the trail toward the village. "My neighbor came by," she said without turning. "Left 2 eggs, said nothing." She paused. "They all think I'm your concubine." He grunted. "They think worse of those who are already dead. I don't want to ruin your name. I have no name left to ruin." She turned to look at him, eyes narrowing. Then I don't want to be your burden. He didn't answer, just let silence stretch between them like old hide. Then he said, "Come inside, it's cold." That evening, she reached for the ladle with her left hand. Her face twisted, just briefly, from pain. "You hurt?" Sefu asked. "Just a pull. You should rest." "I don't like being idle. There's a difference between healing and hiding pain." She blinked at that. "You talk like a village elder sometimes." He gave a half shrug. "Been around grief long enough to know its dialect?" That night, she didn't clean the bowls. She sat in the woven chair by the fire, her legs curled beneath her. Sefu read from a tattered book with missing pages, not for knowledge, just for comfort. After a long time, she said, "I lost someone." He didn't interrupt. "My sister. She tried to stop the trade, tried to tell my mother it was wrong. She was beaten so bad. After that, she couldn't speak right, or walk. I think something inside her cracked." The fire crackled louder, as if it too ached. "I left so my mother would stop," she continued. But she didn't. Just counted silver and told herself the gods were forgiving. Sefu watched her with stillness. "You ever think of going back?" "What for?" she said. "The girl I was is gone, and the woman I'm becoming. I don't think my mother would even recognize her." He looked down at the coals. "That woman, she's learning how to live." "Survive," she corrected. "Surviving is the start of living." She looked at him, lips trembling with something she couldn't quite name. "You always talk like this?" "Only when I think someone's listening." She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. Outside, the drums in Kambala were silent. But inside the hut, something louder was building. A trust made not of words, but of shared silence and quiet firelight. The winds in Kambil changed without warning. One morning, as sun leaked gold across the tops of the palms, Sefu woke to find her already outside. Nyah, the name she had finally whispered 2 nights ago, stood near the woodpile, the iron hatchet heavy in her grip. She wasn't strong enough yet. Her swing was crooked, her wrist trembled. But still, she struck the log again and again. "You'll lose a finger that way," Sefu called from the doorway. Nyah laughed, short and dry. "Wouldn't be the worst thing I've lost." He walked over, took the hatchet without scolding, and began to sharpen it with smooth, practiced strokes. Then he handed it back. "Hold it like this," he said, guiding her hands gently. "Let the weight do the work." She swung again. The log split clean. "Better?" He nodded. "I like doing things right." "Then don't rush." She paused at that. Looked at him fully for the first time in days. "You're different than I expected." "So are you." They walked back toward the hut in silence. When they reached the threshold, Nyah stopped and turned. Her eyes narrowed like dust clouds gathering above dry land. "I keep waiting for someone to come." "Who?" "I don't know. But if they do, I'm scared they'll bring my past with them." Sefu nodded slowly. "Then they'll have to get through me first." She didn't answer. But when she stepped inside, she left the door open just long enough for him to follow without question. That evening, as the fire painted shifting shadows across the walls, she brought him something. A wooden spoon, hand-carved, rough but solid. "For you," she said softly. He turned it over in his palm. "Why?" "Because you didn't ask for anything, and that's the first kindness I've ever known." He didn't thank her. He just used it. But when she turned away, he smiled. Faint, quiet, and unseen. The weeks that followed settled into rhythm, a kind of breath, a pulse. Nyah no longer flinched when wind brushed the windows. Her belly grew rounder, her shoulders straighter. She swept with confidence, not shame. Stirred stew with one hand while patting her side with the other. Humming lullabies that held no words. Sefu noticed. He noticed when she stood closer by the fire. When her eyes lingered longer on the cradle he had once hidden in the back of the hut. A cradle he had carved long ago for a child that never came. One afternoon, as the sky burned orange and cicadas hummed in the trees, Sefu returned with kindling to find her sitting beside it, running her fingers over the carved railing. He didn't interrupt, but that night, while she slept, he pulled the cradle out into the room, cleaned it, oiled the joints, set it near her cot. When she awoke, she stared at it with wide eyes. "I built it for someone who never came," he said. It's yours now, if you want it. Her hands trembled on the edge of the wood. Why are you doing this? Because this place should hold more than ghosts. I don't deserve this. You deserve peace. I don't know how to live in peace. Then we'll learn together. But peace, they both knew, has its price. 2 days later, the trouble arrived. Big Hal Briggs. Hal was a man too large for his horse and too loud for the quiet Camberley village. He rode in at dusk, flanked by 2 others. Men with dust on their boots and shadows in their eyes. Sefu spotted them from the clearing. The way they rode, slow, deliberate, told him everything. He met them just past the last fence post. Evening heat still clung to the ground. Evening, Hal called. Heard you're keeping something warm for the dry season. Turn around, Sefu said. There's nothing for you here. That ain't neighborly. She's got a price on her head, friend. And the law's slow in these parts, but not blind. You take 1 step further, Sefu warned, and I won't bury what's left. Hal laughed, but his smile dropped when the first man reached for his belt. Sefu moved like a storm. The handle of his axe cracked across the man's jaw, sending him into the dust like old grain. The second drew a knife. Sefu met him with a punch to the ribs, dropping him to 1 knee. But Hal, red-faced, panting, had drawn steel. A pistol. It gleamed in the dying light. Sefu's axe was out of reach. The shot rang out like thunder. Hal staggered, then collapsed. Sefu turned in shock. Nyah stood barefoot in the doorway, the long rifle in her hands still smoking. Her eyes wide, but unshaken. I said I wouldn't run again, she called. The last man fled without a word. Sefu ran to Hal, checked for breath, alive, but broken. Then he turned to her. I didn't mean to kill him, she whispered, voice breaking. You didn't. She sagged against the doorway. He caught her before she fell. He carried her inside and laid her down near the fire. She wasn't crying. Not yet. But her hands trembled. I was scared. Fear just means you're still fighting. Outside, the red dusk faded into night. Inside, the fire was warm. But Camille had seen the smoke, and Sefu knew the sheriff would follow it. Word traveled fast in Camberley, faster than goats could scatter, faster than drums could beat. By dawn, the village already knew. Big Hal Briggs downed by a girl with round belly and steel in her hands. Sefu, the silent man who once buried grief like firewood, now standing at her side like a stone wall no wind could move. By midday, children whispered while carrying water, and old women clucked behind veils of cooking smoke. She shot him clean, they said. She stood barefoot in the dust and didn't shake. No woman does that unless she's cursed or chosen. And soon came Miss Olabayo again. Her shawl wrapped tighter this time, but her tongue no softer. She stood at Sefu's door, Bible under one arm, face carved from worry. She's bringing danger, she said. Bounty riders pass through Camberley by week's end, and if word spreads, this village could burn. She's under my roof, Sefu said. That roof could catch fire. Then let it burn. Olabayo stepped back, blinking at him like he was someone new. So you'll risk everything? I already lost everything once, he said. This time, I'm holding on. That evening, Nyah returned from the trading post, flower in hand, lips tight. She didn't speak right away. She just dropped the sack by the stove and washed her hands. Once, twice, 3 times. Then she whispered, They said I seduced you, said I killed a man with my bare hands, called me a witch. Sefu stirred the stew. You let them talk. They'll come. They might. I saw a man at the trail. He had a rifle. He didn't look at the goods. He looked at me. He had a paper folded in his coat. Sefu didn't respond right away. Later, when she lay curled near the fire, he moved quietly to the door and bolted it, sharpened the axe, checked the rifle, like a man bracing for rain that smelled like blood. At first light, he saddled the mule and rode to see the village sheriff, Adisa Clay, a man with a tiny mouth and a badge too large for his chest, the kind who wore law like a second skin but never seemed to sweat under it. I heard what you told Olabayo, Clay said without standing. You're harboring a fugitive. I'm protecting a woman. She's got bounty on her. That's law. Sefu's voice stayed low. You ever read that paper? Says she's dangerous. You ever see danger look like a girl who cries when babies cry? Paper don't lie. Paper never had hands around its throat, Sefu snapped. Never got bought and sold by its mother. Clay looked away. Sefu stepped forward once. "She's safe in my hut. You want her. Bring fire." And then he turned and left. That night, Sefu returned dusty, quiet. Nyah met him at the door. "Well?" she asked. "He'll do nothing," Sefu replied. "Not yet. And if others come?" He didn't answer with words. He moved to the corner, knelt, and pulled out a wooden cradle. Dusty, unused. He set it near her sleeping mat. "I made it," he said. "Before." "For who?" He didn't say. She stepped closer, her hand brushing the edge. "I don't deserve this." "You do." "I'm still scared." "So am I." "But I don't want to run." "Then don't." 2 mornings later, the wind changed again. Not the breeze, the weight of it. The kind of wind that comes before trouble. Nyah felt it first. She stood outside, hand on her belly, eyes scanning the path like a woman waiting for ghosts. They came at dusk. 3 riders, one too fat for his horse, one too quiet, one in a coat too clean for Campbell dust. The sheriff, a stranger, and a man with a scroll. Sefu stepped outside, the rifle slung low on his shoulder, calm. The sheriff didn't speak. The clean-coated man did. "I carry orders," he said. "That girl inside, Nyah, she's wanted. Escaped a legal transaction. Her name is on the ledger." "She gave birth not an hour ago," Sefu replied. The man blinked. "She's still under arrest. She ran from a man who bought her." "Not what the papers say." "Then your papers lie." The wind stirred dust between their boots. The man stepped forward. "You going to interfere with law?" Sefu said. "If you want to take her, you'll need to step over my grave." A long silence followed. Clay looked down at the ground, then back at the house, and then said, "She's not here." The stranger froze. "What?" "She's not here," Clay repeated. "No crime here to chase, not today. You'll regret this." "I already do," Sefu said. And they left. Just like that. Gone into the dusk. When he stepped back inside, Nyah was sitting upright, baby wrapped in cloth against her chest. "You spoke for me," she whispered. "I acted for you. They could have killed you." "They still might." She held the baby tighter. "She needs a name." "Not mine," he said. "Not his." "Something new," she whispered. "Then start with that." Outside, the moon rose like a drum. And inside, where smoke curled soft, and the air tasted like breath and sweat and hope, a name was forming. Something new. Something theirs. The days that followed moved slowly, like clouds waiting for rain. Inside the hut, time softened its edges. Nyah moved with new caution, her body healing, her rhythm adjusting to the cry and hunger of the small life pressed against her. The baby, named Amara, after no one in particular but meaning Grace, slept often and loudly, as if declaring her right to exist. Sefu built more shelves, repaired the water jug, chopped wood with the focus of a man preparing for siege. Though the storm never came. No riders, no lawmen, just the village watching, always watching. The people of Kambela had long memories, but short courage. Some whispered that Sefu was cursed. Others said the girl had cast a spell over him. But no one came close. Not since Big Hal had limped away with bruised ribs and shame rotting in his mouth. And so, Campbell spoke in distance, not daggers. Even Miss Olabayo didn't return. But the silence wasn't peace. It was simply waiting. One night, while the fire cracked softly and Amara snored like a dreaming bird, Nyah sat across from Sefu, hands folded in her lap. The light flickered across her cheekbones, across the faint shadows beneath her eyes, across the small smile she wore more often now. "She's loud," she said, nodding at the baby. "She's yours," Sefu replied. "She's yours too. You just haven't admitted it." He didn't smile, but he didn't deny it either. "You're not what I expected," she said. "I'm what was left." She leaned forward. "Do you ever wish it had all gone different? That you never took me in?" "No." "No? Oh, if I hadn't opened the door that morning, I'd still be breathing, but I wouldn't be living." She blinked once, twice, and then she whispered, "I think I'm scared of happiness. It feels like something that can be stolen." Sefu looked at her. Not through her, not around her, at her. "Then we guard it." The next week brought new rhythms. Sefu took Amara on his back during short walks to the river. Nyah wove baskets and began to hum again. Not the broken songs of before, but fuller now, bolder. She smiled more. And sometimes she laughed. Loud, sharp, like a gourd cracking. Sefu built her a loom, not because she asked, but because she'd once stared at the corner of the hut too long, as if missing something she didn't remember. When he gave it to her, she said nothing, just touched the smooth wood and nodded once, the same way he nodded when she handed him the patched vest, mended where the fire had singed it weeks ago. But still, in quiet moments, she'd glance toward the path, toward the place where law and memory once threatened to return. She never said it aloud, but Sefu knew. One evening, a young boy from the village, Musa, a goat herder, crept up the trail. He stood shy at the edge of the fence, twisting a hat in his hands. "I brought honey," he said. "For what?" "For the baby. She cries like a lion cub. It's good luck." Sefu took the honey and nodded once. "Tell no one you came." "I already haven't," the boy said, and vanished. That was the first crack. Then came Abili, the old widow with the crippled knee. She brought dried herbs for Nyah's bath and left before they could thank her. Then a small girl, silent, nameless, who dropped a string of beads on the stoop and ran. And then silence again. Not the sharp-edged kind, the kind that grows when something deep begins to shift. One morning, Nyah said, "They're not ready to forgive me, but they're trying not to hate me." Sefu replied, "They don't matter. They do. Because one day Amar will ask who I was." He looked at the child, now sleeping in a reed basket beneath the window. Her tiny hands curled, her lips puckered mid-dream. "Then tell her the truth." "What is the truth?" "That you bled and fought and stayed standing." Later that day, Sefu returned from the woods to find Nyah painting the outside of the hut with a thick clay paste. Not to hide it, to mark it. A pattern of circles and lines, an old symbol of rebirth. "Camberley will know this house now," she said. "They'll have to call it something." He looked at the design. "I hope they call it home." That night, she lay Amara in the cradle. For the first time, the child didn't cry. She just watched the flames, blinking slowly, like she knew the story was almost done. Nyah looked at Sefu. "She needs a world where men don't buy names and women don't bleed in silence." He nodded. "So we'll build that, with our hands, with our silence, with our staying." Then, as the firelight danced across their faces, she whispered, "Thank you." He looked up. "For what?" "For not asking anything of me, but giving everything anyway." He didn't reply, just reached over and held her hand. Outside, the wind rustled through dry branches. Chickens shifted in sleep. The village was quiet. Inside, a cradle creaked gently. A child breathed. A girl who had been traded now stood tall. A man who had lost everything now stood whole. And in that hut, not made of stone, but of patience, grief, and fire, something impossible had taken root. Not just love, but rebirth. If you ask the wind what happened that season in Kambela, if you ask the trees that watched Sefu Ajani step into fire and not burn, they'll say this: sometimes a girl the world casts out becomes the woman it never deserved. Sometimes a cradle built for ghosts becomes a beginning.